Sunday afternoon, May 22nd, 2011. Families gathered for high school graduation parties across Joplin, Missouri. Children played in backyards while parents grilled burgers. At 5:17 p.m., the sky turned the color of old copper. Then came the sudden roar, windows rattling, walls shuddering. In 6 minutes, what meteorologists later discovered was not just an EF5 tornado, but a monster that achieved the impossible. It maintained peak intensity for 22 straight minutes, obliterating everything in a mile-wide path. This is Joplin, the deadliest tornado in modern United States history. The morning of May 22nd dawned like countless others in Joplin, Missouri. A typical Midwestern Sunday with church services and family gatherings. For many residents, the day held special significance. Joplin High School's graduation ceremony was scheduled for the afternoon at Missouri Southern State University. 455 seniors donned caps and gowns that day, their futures bright with possibility. Parents beamed with pride, siblings fidgeted in formal wear, and grandparents clutched cameras. As the graduates crossed the stage one by one, none could imagine that within hours, their community would be changed forever. Keith Stammer, Joplin's emergency management director, had been monitoring weather reports throughout the day. The Storm Prediction Center in Norman, Oklahoma, had placed southwest Missouri under a moderate risk for severe weather, with a 10% chance of an enhanced Fujita 2 to enhanced Fujita 5 tornado within the region. But Joplin residents had heard similar warnings countless times before. Many would later confess they had become desensitized to tornado warnings, a psychological phenomenon known as false fatigue. At 1:30 p.m., a mesoscale discussion was issued for southwest Missouri. Meteorologists noted that while low-level shear was a bit marginal, it would be more than sufficient for tornadoes given extreme instability. Few residents paid attention to these technical bulletins. Instead, backyard barbecues continued, and graduation parties kicked into full swing. As high school graduate Will Norton headed home with his father from commencement in his new car, a graduation gift, the skies remained deceptively calm. Elsewhere in town, Natalie Gonzalez and her 9-year-old son Augie played in their living room. Reuben Carter, working despite his cerebral palsy, stocked shelves at a convenience store. Nurse Sarah Allen prepared for her shift at Freeman Hospital. None realized these would be the final peaceful moments before devastation arrived. What makes a tornado deadly is not just its power. It is the rare, perfect collision of atmospheric conditions that create a monster. On May 22nd, 2011, those conditions aligned with terrifying precision over Joplin. Meteorologists now understand that 3 critical elements converged that afternoon. First, an intense dry line, the boundary between moist and dry air, pushed eastward across Oklahoma. Second, an unusually powerful jet stream dipped south over the Central Plains. And third, extreme atmospheric instability created what scientists call CAPE, convective available potential energy, that was off the charts for that time of year. By 5 p.m., a supercell thunderstorm had formed west of Joplin. The storm structure was textbook perfect for tornado formation. A powerful updraft created rotation that stretched from ground to upper atmosphere. Doppler radar detected a distinctive hook echo, the fingerprint of a developing tornado. But Joplin faced a unique and deadly challenge that day. The developing tornado was rain-wrapped, completely obscured by curtains of precipitation. Unlike the photogenic funnel clouds that storm chasers chase across open plains, this invisible killer would give its victims no visual warning. At 5:17 p.m., the National Weather Service issued a tornado warning for Joplin, activating outdoor warning sirens. Yet for many residents, these sirens represented the beginning of a tragic chain of psychological miscalculations. Joplin had a history of weekly siren tests and frequent false alarms. The national average for tornado false alarms at the time was 74%, meaning 3 out of 4 warnings did not result in significant tornadoes. Locals had grown accustomed to hearing sirens without seeing threatening weather. This behavioral conditioning would prove fatal. When the siren sounded at 5:17 p.m., most residents followed a familiar pattern. They looked outside, saw no funnel cloud, and continued with their activities. Some turned to television or radio for confirmation, but early coverage focused on a separate storm cell north of town. Instead of taking immediate shelter, many waited for additional evidence, unwittingly squandering precious minutes of warning time. A secondary siren activation occurred approximately 20 minutes after the initial warning, an unusual occurrence that finally prompted many to take the threat seriously. But by then, the monster was already on their doorstep. At 5:34 p.m., the tornado touched down just west of Joplin, near the border between Missouri and Kansas. Initially, a modest EF1 on the enhanced Fujita scale, it rapidly intensified as it approached the city limits. Within minutes, wind speeds exceeded 200 miles per hour, and the funnel expanded to nearly a mile wide. Storm chaser Jeff Piotrowski, who had positioned himself southwest of town, was among the first to recognize the catastrophic potential. Racing alongside a police car, he desperately urged officers to activate the sirens again. The tornado was already destroying its first neighborhood, but many residents still did not know what was coming. The tornado's structure defied conventional understanding. Instead of a single vortex, it contained multiple suction vortices rotating around a common center, essentially tornadoes within the tornado. These smaller vortices produced extreme localized wind speeds that could completely obliterate one house, while leaving another standing just yards away. Most remarkable and terrifying was the tornado's unprecedented duration of intensity. Typical EF5 tornadoes maintain peak intensity for a few minutes before weakening. The Joplin tornado maintained catastrophic EF5 strength for 22 continuous minutes, a meteorological anomaly that researchers are still struggling to explain today. As the tornado entered the city's southwest edge, it encountered its first densely populated neighborhoods. The sound was unlike anything survivors would ever forget, variously described as a freight train, a jet engine, and most commonly, the roar of 1,000 winds. For those in its direct path, the experience was horrifying. Surveillance video from a gas station showed the air turning a strange sepia color moments before the building disintegrated. Cell phone footage captured from inside bathrooms and closets recorded the sounds of homes being torn apart around terrified families. The tornado's inner core, what meteorologists call the damage cavity, contained winds so powerful they stripped asphalt from roads, bark from trees, and reduced steel frame buildings to twisted skeletons. Researchers would later confirm that these winds approached the theoretical limit for tornado intensity. As it crossed Main Street, the tornado reached its maximum width, stretching 0.7 of a mile across. Debris was lofted more than 30,000 feet into the atmosphere, appearing as an anomalous mass on National Weather Service radar. The tornado had become an airborne debris generator, hurling chunks of buildings, vehicles, and trees at lethal velocities. At 5:41 p.m., the tornado slammed into St. John's Regional Medical Center, a 9-story hospital with 183 patients and hundreds of staff inside. The building's concrete and steel frame withstood the initial impact, but virtually every window shattered, allowing the tornado's full fury to penetrate the interior. In the intensive care unit, Nurse Shayla Ballum huddled over her patients as medical equipment was ripped from walls and tossed through the air like projectiles. Ventilators failed as backup generators were destroyed. Patients on life support began to deteriorate rapidly. Heroism emerged amid chaos. Staff formed human chains to evacuate critical patients down darkened stairwells. Doctors performed emergency procedures by flashlight. When ambulances could not reach the hospital through debris-choked streets, medical personnel carried patients to nearby pickup trucks that had been converted into makeshift emergency vehicles. But not everyone could be saved. The tornado claimed 13 lives at St. John's Hospital alone. X-ray machines weighing hundreds of pounds were found embedded in walls. The hospital's 8-ton MRI machine was displaced from its foundation. The building itself was damaged beyond repair and would later be demolished. A half-mile south of the hospital, the tornado tore through Home Depot, where about 30 people had sought shelter. The building's flat roof and tilt-up wall construction proved catastrophically vulnerable. When the walls collapsed, they crushed everyone beneath them. Only a small group who fled to an impromptu shelter in a concrete bathroom survived. Among them was 10-year-old Mason Lillard and her cousin, Lodge Grigsby, who suffered horrific injuries after being impaled by debris. A wooden splinter longer than a baseball bat pierced Mason's back and protruded through her chest. She would survive only through the extraordinary efforts of trauma surgeons at Freeman Hospital, Joplin's second medical center that remained operational. At the same time, the Walmart Supercenter on Rangeline Road disintegrated, under the tornado's assault. Those who followed the store's emergency protocol and gathered at the front of the building were directly in the path of collapsing walls. Those who instinctively ran to the back, against official instructions, had higher survival rates, a grim lesson that would later reshape emergency shelter protocols nationwide. As the tornado continued eastward, it devastated entire neighborhoods. In the Hampshire Terrace, in an apartment building, artist Lee Humphrey grabbed his neighbor's baby and ran for a bathroom as the building began to come apart around them. His scalp became embedded with pebbles as the roof vanished overhead, but the infant in his arms miraculously remained unharmed throughout the ordeal. Elsewhere, recent high school graduate Will Norton, driving home from commencement with his father, was sucked through the sunroof of their Hummer H3, despite his father's desperate attempt to hold on to him. His body would be found in a pond several days later. In a modest home on Kentucky Avenue, Crystal Whiteley huddled in a bathtub with her 3 children as the tornado struck. The force of the wind literally tore 2 of her children, 10-year-old Shantae and 6-year-old Trenton, from her arms. Despite her desperate grip, they were pulled away into the vortex. Shantae was killed instantly, while Trenton was found alive but critically injured. For 6 terrifying minutes, the EF5 tornado carved its path through Joplin. When it finally dissipated at 6:12 p.m., just east of the city limits, it had traveled 22.1 miles on the ground. Behind it lay a scar of total destruction nearly a mile wide and 6 miles long. Roughly 30% of Joplin had been obliterated. As night fell over Joplin, the true scope of the disaster began to emerge. The tornado had destroyed or damaged over 8,000 buildings, including 7,500 homes. More than 1,150 people were injured, many critically. And most devastating of all, 161 lives had been lost, making it the deadliest single tornado in the United States since modern record-keeping began in 1950. The human toll was staggering. Children were orphaned, parents lost children, entire families were wiped out. Every person in Joplin either knew someone who died or knew someone who knew someone. The community's social fabric was shredded as thoroughly as its physical infrastructure. In the immediate aftermath, hospitals were overwhelmed. Freeman Hospital, still operational but damaged, received over 500 patients in the first hours. Medical supplies ran critically low. Physicians performed emergency surgeries in hallways and cafeterias. Off-duty, medical personnel from throughout the region rushed to help, many driving through debris-strewn streets on their own initiative. The stories of survival were as remarkable as they were heartbreaking. At the devastated Walmart, a group of strangers formed a human chain to lift a concrete wall that had trapped a young mother and her children. Outside the destroyed Home Depot, civilians with no medical training performed improvised first aid on critically injured victims, using torn clothing as bandages and store shelving as makeshift stretchers. One of the most extraordinary survival stories came from Fast Strip convenience store, where 24 strangers, including customers, employees, and people who had pulled off the highway seeking shelter, crowded into a walk in cooler moments before the tornado struck. As the building disintegrated around them, Reuben Carter, the employee with cerebral palsy, used his body to shield a mother and her young daughter. All 24 people in the cooler survived. Meanwhile, Matt Stevens, caught in his car as the tornado hit, lost his leg when the vehicle was crushed by debris. He would later describe not just the physical pain, but the ongoing psychological trauma, the anxiety that strikes whenever storm clouds gather, the reflexive flinch at sudden loud noises. The search for missing persons continued for days. Social media became a crucial tool, with Facebook pages dedicated to reuniting families, accumulating thousands of posts within hours. Hospitals established photo walls of unidentified patients too injured to communicate. Parents searched desperately for children who had been at different locations when the tornado struck. Even animals bore the brunt of the disaster. Over 1,300 pets were displaced, their owners either dead, injured, or evacuated. The Joplin Humane Society, working with the ASPCA, established emergency shelters that would eventually reunite 529 animals with their owners. The remainder were adopted in a massive community event that drew participants from across the country. For many survivors, the psychological impact proved as devastating as physical injuries. Post-traumatic stress disorder became widespread, especially among children who had experienced the tornado firsthand. Nightmares, anxiety attacks, and extreme weather phobia became common. Local mental health resources were quickly overwhelmed, forcing many to seek treatment hundreds of miles away. Perhaps most poignant were the small personal tragedies that statistics could not capture. Wedding photos lost forever. Family heirlooms passed down for generations, now scattered across miles of rubble. Children's artwork, love letters, diplomas, birth certificates, the physical artifacts of human lives and memories were simply gone, carried away by the wind or buried under tons of debris. Within minutes of the tornado's passage, emergency responders from throughout the region converged on Joplin. The initial response faced nearly insurmountable challenges. Communication systems were destroyed, roads were blocked by debris, and the sheer scale of destruction defied comprehension. Missouri Governor Jay Nixon declared a state of emergency within hours and activated the National Guard. FEMA personnel arrived by dawn the next day. But the most remarkable aspect of the emergency response was not governmental. It was the spontaneous mobilization of ordinary citizens. By sunrise on Monday, thousands of volunteers had descended on Joplin. They came from neighboring towns, from across Missouri, from surrounding states, and eventually from across the nation. Armed with chainsaws, shovels, and work gloves, they formed impromptu rescue and recovery teams that pushed into areas emergency vehicles could not reach. Churches transformed into shelters and distribution centers. Restaurant owners with damaged businesses set up grills in parking lots to feed rescuers. Local construction companies deployed heavy equipment without waiting for official contracts or payment guarantees. The scale of the response was unprecedented. Within the first week, an estimated 25,000 volunteers had arrived in Joplin, half the city's entire pre-tornado population. They removed debris, searched for survivors, distributed supplies, and provided comfort to the traumatized. This volunteer army faced grim tasks. Search and rescue quickly became search and recovery, as hopes for finding survivors diminished. Ordinary people found themselves pulling bodies from rubble, covering them with blankets, and marking locations for recovery teams. The psychological toll on these impromptu responders would only become apparent months later, as many developed delayed onset PTSD. Meanwhile, professional first responders worked around the clock. Medical personnel went days without sleep. Police officers who had lost their own homes continued reporting for duty. Firefighters from 76 departments across 4 states joined the effort, many bringing their own supplies to avoid depleting Joplin's resources. The Missouri State Highway Patrol deployed dozens of troopers to maintain security and assist in search operations. Urban search and rescue teams with specialized equipment and cadaver dogs methodically cleared damaged structures. The Army Corps of Engineers began the monumental task of debris removal, eventually handling over 3 million cubic yards of wreckage, enough to fill a football field nearly 200 feet high. Technology played a crucial role in the response. This was one of the first major American disasters where social media served as a... When traditional communication networks failed, Facebook and Twitter became vital conduits for information. A citizen-led Facebook group called Joplin Tornado Info gained 170,000 followers within days, becoming so effective that emergency officials began using it to distribute official information. FEMA established a disaster recovery center where survivors could register for assistance, but private charity far outpaced governmental aid. The Red Cross, Salvation Army, and hundreds of smaller organizations raised tens of millions of dollars. Perhaps most impressive was the speed with which these resources reached those in need. Within 48 hours, most survivors had access to food, clothing, and temporary shelter. For all its success, the emergency response revealed critical vulnerabilities. Warning systems had failed to motivate appropriate action. Building codes had proven inadequate for tornado resistance. Communication systems had collapsed precisely when they were most needed. These lessons would eventually drive significant reforms in disaster preparedness nationwide. As Joplin began the long process of rebuilding, investigators from the National Institute of Standards and Technology launched what would become the most comprehensive study ever conducted of a tornado disaster. Their findings would transform how America prepares for, responds to, and rebuilds after tornadoes. The most immediate lesson concerned warnings. Traditional warnings had failed not because they were not issued. Joplin had 17 minutes of lead time, above the national average, but residents did not take appropriate action. This phenomenon, called false alarm fatigue, had conditioned people to ignore warnings after years of alerts that did not result in significant tornadoes. In response, the National Weather Service developed a new system called impact-based warnings, which uses more specific language about threat levels and potential consequences. Instead of generic tornado warnings, these enhanced alerts explicitly state dangers such as complete destruction of entire neighborhoods, or that flying debris will be deadly to people and animals. Building codes underwent radical revision. Before Joplin, most structures in tornado-prone regions were designed primarily for gravitational loads, with minimal consideration for extreme lateral forces. Post-Joplin research revealed that even EF3 tornadoes, significantly weaker than the Joplin EF5, could destroy conventionally built structures. In 2015, the International Code Council approved the first tornado-specific building code requirements in American history, a direct result of the National Institute of Standards and Technology Joplin investigation. These new standards required enhanced protection for schools and critical facilities in tornado-prone regions, including hardened safe rooms designed to withstand winds exceeding 250 miles per hour. St. John's Regional Medical Center, destroyed in the tornado, was rebuilt as Mercy Hospital Joplin with revolutionary design features. The new $465 million facility incorporated tornado-resistant windows capable of withstanding 140 miles per hour winds, reinforced critical care areas, and redundant power systems protected by concrete shelters. It became a model for tornado-resistant hospital design nationwide. Joplin's public schools were similarly transformed. Every new school building incorporated FEMA standard safe rooms capable of sheltering not just students, but surrounding neighborhoods. Joplin High School, completely destroyed in the tornado, was rebuilt with innovative architectural features specifically designed to resist extreme winds. Emergency communication systems evolved dramatically. The disaster exposed dangerous gaps in public alerting capabilities. Many residents never received warnings because they were indoors where outdoor sirens could not be heard, or because power outages had disabled their televisions and radios. In response, the Federal Communications Commission accelerated deployment of wireless emergency alerts, which delivered geo-targeted warnings directly to cell phones without requiring user registration. Joplin and surrounding communities developed standardized siren protocols to reduce confusion and established multiple redundant communication channels for emergency information. Perhaps the most profound legacy has been psychological. The Joplin experience forced emergency management professionals to confront human behavioral factors that technological solutions alone could not address. Warning systems only work when people heed them. Building codes only matter when they are followed. Recovery only succeeds when communities maintain social cohesion under extreme stress. Today, Joplin stands as both a warning and an inspiration. The physical scars remain visible. Empty lots where houses once stood, young trees replacing ancient ones that had survived a century, only to be destroyed in minutes. But new growth has emerged from devastation. Downtown has been revitalized. Hospital capacity has expanded. School facilities have improved dramatically. The tornado prompted unprecedented research into tornado formation, detection, and impact mitigation. Advanced dual polarization radar systems, partly inspired by the Joplin disaster, now provide meteorologists with far more detailed information about tornado structure and debris content. Improved computer modeling allows more accurate prediction of tornado paths and intensities. Most importantly, the Joplin experience revolutionized how we understand the relationship between warnings, human psychology, and protective action. We now recognize that effective disaster response is not just about issuing warnings. It is about issuing warnings that people will act upon. Joplin's recovery demonstrates the extraordinary resilience of human communities in the face of catastrophic loss. From the depths of unimaginable tragedy, the city has rebuilt not just its physical infrastructure, but its communal bonds. Annual memorial ceremonies bring together survivors, responders, and families of those lost, maintaining connections that transcend physical destruction. Yet for all the healing, the trauma remains. Survivors still flinch at the sound of tornado sirens. Parents still hold their children tighter when storms approach. And on quiet afternoons when the sky turns an unusual color, residents of Joplin remember what happened on that Sunday in May, and they take nothing for granted. The legacy of Joplin extends far beyond its city limits. Every tornado warning issued today reflects lessons learned from that terrible day. Every school safe room built in tornado-prone regions stands as a silent acknowledgement of those who died seeking shelter where none existed. And every life saved by improved warning systems, stronger buildings, and better emergency protocols represents a small redemption of an otherwise senseless tragedy. In the end, the Joplin tornado teaches us that while we cannot control the forces of nature, we can control how we prepare for them, how we respond to them, and how we recover from them. The true measure of a community is not found in its ability to avoid disaster, but in its capacity to emerge from disaster stronger, wiser, and more compassionate than before. The Joplin tornado was not just a natural disaster. It was a wake-up call that transformed how America responds to tornadic threats. From improved warning systems to strengthened building codes, its legacy saves lives to this day. If you found this examination valuable, support Earth Attacks by subscribing and sharing this video. Every subscription helps us continue documenting nature's most powerful phenomena and the human resilience that emerges in their aftermath. Stay safe, stay prepared, and remember, knowledge is your best defense against nature's fury.